Piers Morgan has spent decades building a public persona around confrontation. Not debate, not discussion, confrontation. His brand has never been about listening or understanding. It has been about dominance. Talking louder, talking longer, talking over people's pain until it disappears beneath sarcasm, scoffing and disbelief. Vulnerability in his worldview is something to be challenged, not respected. Emotional honesty is treated as performance. Mental health disclosures are framed as exaggeration. Lived experience becomes suspect the moment it comes from someone he has decided not to like. And yet all it took was one moment of bad footing in a London restaurant to flip the script in a way no argument ever has. A slip, a heavy fall, a fractured femur, a hip operation, crutches leaning against a hospital bed. Suddenly, the man who has mocked public vulnerability for years found himself unable to stop sharing his own. Almost immediately the updates began. Hospital photos appeared within hours. Details followed in real time. Surgery specifics, mobility struggles, light-hearted jokes masking discomfort, complaints about being grounded and unable to travel, frustration with recovery, gratitude for medical staff. It was a complete narrative arc, shared publicly, eagerly and without hesitation. And the response was immediate. Concern poured in, sympathy followed. Well-wishes filled comment sections, media outlets softened their tone. Headlines emphasized bravery, resilience, and determination. The coverage framed the injury as serious, disruptive, and deserving of compassion. No skepticism, no mockery, no disbelief, just empathy. And that's where the irony begins to speak for itself. Because what Piers Morgan experienced in that moment was not just physical injury, it was exposure. Not of his body, but of a contradiction that has sat at the centre of his public career for years. This was not a quiet recovery. This was not a private healing process. This was content. Morgan did exactly what he has long condemned others for doing. He made his pain visible. He documented it. He narrated it. He invited the audience into the experience. He used humour to cope. He used updates to stay connected. He made vulnerability part of the conversation. The difference is not behaviour. The difference is who was doing it. Because when Meghan Sussex spoke openly about her mental health, the response was brutal. Her words were dissected. Her motives were questioned. Her honesty was challenged. She was accused of manipulation, exaggeration, and deceit. And Piers Morgan was not a passive observer in that reaction. He was one of its loudest architects. He did not simply say he disagreed. He said he did not believe her. He went on air and dismissed her lived experience outright. He treated her vulnerability as something to be exposed and ridiculed rather than understood. He framed empathy as weakness, until he needed it. Then empathy became reasonable. Sharing became normal. Public updates became acceptable. The audience was expected to care. That shift did not go unnoticed. What was striking was how instinctively Morgan leaned into the very system he has spent years attacking. The moment pain entered his own life, he understood exactly how to activate public sympathy. He shared just enough detail to feel authentic. He added humour to soften the edges. He framed frustration as relatable. He allowed the audience to witness his limitations. It worked, because this is how empathy operates in media culture. Pain becomes palatable when it belongs to familiar, powerful figures. Vulnerability is humanized when it comes from people the system already trusts. And Piers Morgan knows this system intimately. He helped shape it. For years, he has thrived on provocation. He escalates conflict. He invites backlash. He frames criticism as persecution. And when accountability appears, He dismisses it as overreaction. But this time, the contradiction didn't require critics to point it out. It was embedded in the moment itself. Because for once, Morgan was not mocking vulnerability, he was relying on it. And perhaps the most revealing detail of all was what didn't happen. For the first time in recent memory, Meghan Sussex was nowhere in the narrative. No insinuations, no sideways comments, no attempt to link his misfortune to broader cultural grievances, no effort to fold her name into the story as a symbol of everything he dislikes. That silence was loud, because Morgan has spent years using Meghan as a convenient lightning rod for every frustration, every cultural shift, every discomfort he experiences with change. From ratings slumps to institutional criticism, her name has often been deployed as shorthand for decline, disruption, or deception. Yet here, in a moment of genuine vulnerability, that obsession disappeared. It was as if, faced with his own fragility, the familiar scapegoat no longer fit. And this is where people began using the word karma, not as cruelty, not as celebration, but as perspective. No one deserves to be injured. Pain is not justice. Suffering is not punishment. But there is something undeniably revealing about watching someone who has dismissed the pain of others suddenly depend on the same mechanisms of empathy he once derided. There's something instructive about the shift. Morgan's recovery narrative followed a familiar rhythm. Daily updates, casual humour layered over discomfort, gratitude mixed with frustration, appeals for patience, acknowledgement of limits, appreciation for care, all completely human responses, and responses that closely resemble the experiences he has minimized in others. This is not about mocking his fall. It's about observing the difference in tone when pain belongs to him. Because when Meghan Sussex spoke about her mental health, she was not asking for praise. She was asking to be believed. She was asking for understanding in an environment that had already decided she was untrustworthy. Morgan didn't just refuse that understanding. He publicly denied it. He amplified doubt. He encouraged disbelief. And now, faced with his own recovery, he did not expect doubt. He expected compassion. And he received it. The media did not question whether he was exaggerating. They did not accuse him of seeking attention. They did not frame his updates as manipulative. They did not suggest he was weaponizing vulnerability. They simply reported his experience. That contrast is the core of this moment, because it exposes how empathy is often distributed not based on the depth of pain, but on the identity of the person expressing it. Piers Morgan exists on the favoured side of that equation. His experiences are presumed valid. His pain is taken seriously. His vulnerability is framed as human. Others, particularly women and people of colour who challenge established power structures, are scrutinised, doubted and dissected. Yet the mechanics of sharing were the same. He spoke openly. He documented recovery. He invited engagement. He normalised visibility, the behaviours he has criticised. This moment did not transform Morgan. There is no evidence of self-reflection or accountability. There has been no apology, no acknowledgement of hypocrisy, no reconsideration of how he treats others. But it did offer the public a clear mirror. And many people noticed. Online reactions ranged from sincere concern to pointed observations about irony. Some offered well wishes while still highlighting the contradiction. Others were less charitable, calling out how quickly Morgan embraced empathy when it served him. That reaction was not cruelty. It was consequence. Public figures who build careers on attacking others do not get immunity from comparison when circumstances change. Morgan's fall also highlighted how media narratives bend based on familiarity and power. The accident itself was unremarkable. People fall every day. Injuries happen constantly, but coverage elevated it into a compelling human story. Contrast that with how Meghan's struggles were framed, minimized, questioned, reframed as inconvenience rather than injury. This is not about a hip replacement. It is about who gets believed, who gets grace, who is allowed to be human without interrogation. And that is why this moment resonates beyond gossip or headlines, because it arrived without orchestration, without agenda, without anyone setting out to make a point. It simply happened. And in happening, it revealed long-standing patterns. Piers Morgan did not fall because of karma, but the reaction to his fall illustrated it. The system he helped reinforce turned around and offered him exactly what he has denied others: empathy without suspicion. That does not make him a villain in recovery. It makes him a case study, a reminder that pain is universal, but compassion is selective. And perhaps lying in that hospital bed, scrolling through messages of support, Morgan experienced even briefly what it feels like to be heard without being doubted. If so, that may be the most meaningful outcome of all. Not humiliation, not mockery, but perspective. Because empathy stops being threatening the moment you need it. And when that realization arrives, moments like this are remembered not as jokes or viral updates, but as quiet turning points when the loudest critic found himself standing on the other side of the conversation.